Hello, I'm Somi Arian. I'm a tech philosopher and the founder of InPeak. My guest on today's podcast goes by the name Captain CK. He's one of the bright young minds of Web3 who knows how to hustle and is determined to make his mark on the space. CK was introduced to me to help run our collaborations for InPeak, and I found him to be very insightful. He's also working on a number of his own projects which sound very promising. So I thought it would be a good idea to get him on the podcast and have a conversation. I hope you enjoy. Carson, thank you for being here. When Black Bull, aka Gali, or the other way around, Gali, aka Black Bull, introduced us, I didn't realize that it was you. And we have spoken before. We spoke before about your project house. And now you're working with us, you're helping us with our collaborations with other communities. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about the various things that you're working on, but also most importantly about your experience as a collaboration I suppose architect, right? Like it's not exactly a collab manager, right?
Yeah.
What you're doing, you're architecting, you're orchestrating, right?
hmm
And I thought that it would be a good opportunity for us to kind of dive deeper into how you see the space changing over the past months and where you think it's going. And I have some thoughts, some concerns about how things are changing in the space. What is sustainable, what is not sustainable as Web3 is becoming more mature. So it'd be interesting to pick your brain on the things that you are observing. And I think from the viewpoint of somebody who is orchestrating all these collaborations between different communities, I think
hmm
you will probably pick on some nuances that for a lot of people looking from the outside, they might not necessarily know. So first things first, do you want to explain a little bit about, introduce yourself a bit and then say, what is it that you're working on these days and how you got to working on what you're doing right now?
Yeah, for sure. Let's do it. So I do quite a bit in the space. Most people know me as CK. That's kind of what I go by. I recently rebranded myself to Captain CK, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes. But primarily within the space, the main thing I do is I run a consultancy. I do go-to-market strategy, advising, collab management, marketing, really everything under the sun to help IP enter the space the right way. I think the niche I've kind of built for myself, which I think is really awesome, is working with a lot of the higher quality leads in the space because they just require a different level of intentionality. You can't just run a collab round with Warner Records and really have it be capitalized to its full level because there's so much resource on the table and there's so much more that these big brands can do to be successful. And you have to be so delicate with the IP. Like it's just a different game. And so that's primarily what I do. I've worked with a lot of more notable IP, including Warner Records, Bose, CNN, Voyagers, the Smurfs, and most recently Zepeto. But yeah, that's the main thing I do in the space. On top of that, through my consultancy, I also have a service wing where I just do like collab management, or I have other services I offer that allow me to capitalize on kind of the network I've developed through collab management, through advising, and through my consultancy as a whole. On top of that, I also use my consultancy to identify the brands I really want to stick with and work with long term. The main ones I would say are House, Probably Nothing, and Fusion XYZ. I kind of got my start in the space actually with Probably Nothing. And if you don't know, or if anyone doesn't know, that's Jeremy Fall's brand. And he was my first job. He kind of took a chance on me, and I'm eternally grateful for that because I was incredibly unqualified for the position he hired me for. And looking back, it's crazy to kind of see where I came from. But yeah, that's kind of how I got my start.
Very nice. So, so Jeremy is coming on the podcast as well. Thanks to you. You made the introduction. So, how did you get started there? But were you like a member in his community? Is that how it started?
So I actually was an alpha caller in the Heart Project. I don't know if you know if the Heart Project is kind of my so I won't give a ton of context on it. It was a really cool project though. It was really the project that got me believing in NFTs. You know, I was a whale. I held 20 and like I didn't have a large portfolio. It was like 80% of my portfolio because I just loved what they were doing. You know, I'm personally not much of a creative, and like the Heart Project is a super creative community. So it's an interesting dynamic. And I think kind of the reason I was that way with Hearts is, I mean, this is just like going off the top of my head. Like I'm I almost feel blessed that I'm not a creative because I think it's so hard and so vulnerable to like be a creative because you're essentially like taking your work and letting other people value it. Like that is such a vulnerable and scary thing that like I just respect creatives so much for it. And the Heart Project is such an incredibly creative community. You know, like that's what it was about. It was all about like bringing artists together, and I thought that was such a cool thing. And so I just wanted to play my part in it. And so I got involved with the team there. I wasn't like paid or anything. It was pretty unofficial, but I was an alpha caller. So I mean, I helped people find different opportunities in the space. And that was really my very first role. My first paid role was with Jeremy. But through that, one of Jeremy's team members, before they launched Probably Nothing, reached out to me and just wanted to have a conversation because at the time, I was kind of doing alpha calling a different way. You know, I've always been a big believer in like education. You know, I think education is like the key to onboarding, you know, the key to actually getting people invested because like what made me my success in Web3 wasn't my ability to trade or make money. It was the fact that I got convicted and actually understood NFTs, you know, and so that's really what we need. And so I kind of took alpha calling from an educational perspective, and through that, I mean, people noticed. It was just an interesting thing to some people. And so I had a conversation with Jeremy through there. And I mean, we just kind of hit it off. You know, we had a great conversation about what he was getting ready to do in the space. And I had the experience and the knowledge through alpha calling to kind of identify what separates a good and successful project from a bad project, you know? And so that's what I believe is the real reason I was hired on, is because I kind of had that perspective as an alpha caller. And so, yeah, really cool thing. That's kind of how I got to know Jeremy. He hired me as a community manager, and I believe it was advisor. I know it was community manager. I honestly don't remember, which is weird, but I know, yeah, I came on as the community manager. I did some collab management. That was kind of my first taste of it, was with Jeremy allocating the allow list spots for Probably Nothing and brokering some partnerships. But yeah, I started building out a community from there, and it was really awesome. I actually loved community management. It was a really cool thing.
Awesome. So it sounds like you've got quite a lot of experience both in community management, collab management, you know, all these different things. So tell me, how long have you been working in the Web3 space now?
8 months. 8 months. I started April, April last
Okay.
year, maybe.
Okay. Very
I don't
cool.
even
So
really know, to be
that's quite a
honest.
short amount of time, and you've done so much. That's amazing. So the speed of the space really suits you, I guess, right? You know,
Yeah.
if this is the speed in the bear market, imagine what it would be like when the next
Oh
bull.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
I'm excited.
yeah, definitely. Me too. Okay, so you mentioned alpha caller. So tell me a little bit about what that is exactly.
Yeah, so I gotta be careful with how I say this. I don't want to say like investment advisor because obviously nothing's financial advice, but like it's someone who's very good at trading, who shares what they're trading, you know, who shares what they're looking at. Or I would say, even in a broader sense, almost like an educator, I think is a good word, because I think alpha can be taken from like a ton of different angles. You know, you have Bonglo, for example. He's my space co-host. I'm launching a media brand with him. I connected you with him. Great alpha caller in the space, but like he takes everything from an educational standpoint. You know, he puts out these broad macroeconomic summaries each week. You know, like he does cool stuff like that. Whereas you have other people who are doing entry and exit price on like random degen mints. You know, it's like there's so many different ways you can take it. I would say on a broad level, it's an educator, you know, someone trying to help you get better at trading NFTs, whether that means you actually, you know, mirroring their trades, or actually kind of building that mindset for you and building a framework to better evaluate NFTs from a financial standpoint.
The thing is a bit of a tricky thing, isn't it? Because it's like, you know, once you become known as an alpha caller, I suppose it's something that people then expect you to always get it right, but then also there is this issue of maybe brands will or other communities will approach you, I'm guessing, to it kind of like put a good word in for them, right? Like there must be all
Mm.
of these
Oh
complexities.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's so much ethical like gray area, I would say, because yes, all of that happens. People approach you to call their project. People approach you to hire you. People approach like there's just so much conversation that happens with alpha callers because they carry so much influence. I would say, I mean, there's honestly a good amount of liquidity demanded and controlled by these alpha callers. You can go watch like when an influential alpha caller calls a project, you will see the floor price pump. There is volume coming in. It shows up on all of the trending pages. It actually makes a really, really big difference. And so, yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I don't alpha call anymore. I would say one of many reasons, but one of them is I didn't like all the ethical dilemmas, because you say your friend approaches you, they're launching a project that they want you to support. Like, now what do you do? Because that's a tricky thing, because maybe it's not something you would call on your own, but now you're calling something that might not be the best for your community, but it's your friend's project. So like there's just a lot of I would say a lot of tiptoeing there that you have to just be careful with. And I mean, people try to pay you. Like there's people who do take payments for alpha calling, and that's incredibly unethical because they're literally, I mean, getting paid to give their community subpar information. Like it's not good. And so it's just, I think it's a dangerous role to be in, because there's just a lot of monetary incentive to give your community less than you should.
Yeah, and you mentioned something about volume. I think with royalties going possibly away, and we can maybe this might be a good entry to that conversation. So what's your take on royalties? Do you think they will be going away? Do you think that they're not sustainable? Because it seems to me that one way or the other they are potentially gonna go away.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a tricky thing. I mean, I think it sucks because I think royalties were one of the great use cases of NFTs. The idea that an artist can, or a creative or whoever, can continue to profit off of their work after it's initially sold is amazing. I think that onboarded probably so many artists, because there's a lot of artists whose art's constantly getting traded around and they're only getting that primary sale. So it's such a cool use case. I don't think it'll necessarily go away. I think a lot of it will change. I mean, just to be transparent, like I'm not super educated on this topic. My understanding of contracts is you can have contracts that require royalties. The way I see it going, and I might be wrong about this, is you're going to have, that technological barrier where now it's not necessarily marketplaces deciding it, but a lot of it's directly like in the contract. Like I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think OpenSea has contracts that do that, where they can require, it's like it can only be traded on OpenSea, and OpenSea requires royalty. Do you know if that's correct?
Yeah, so no, actually, basically, what they're doing is that it's still going to be based on something that they have to do. So you're still relying on a third party, right? So you can't build it into the contract because, let's say, for example, what if somebody transfers it from one wallet of their own to another wallet, or they
Yeah.
gift it, right? Like, so it's really hard to build it into the contract. What OpenSea is doing is basically saying that if you don't trade it on other places, so basically they want you to block the other marketplaces so that you can only trade there, which is just not sustainable, because now as a result of that, Blur is coming back and saying that actually we want you to block OpenSea. So the problem isn't solved, because the problem is that this is something that ultimately you're relying on a third party, which it goes against what blockchain was supposed to be about. So I think, I mean, personally, I think that royalties going away is potentially a good thing. I think there is more good to bad because of the royalty. The whole concept of volume has become a thing, and in reality, it's not sustainable, because we have seen, for example, I recently sold my proof pass, and we have seen that the problem is that because the creators are incentivized to make the price want to go up, and then when the price goes up, they can't deliver the amount of value for that price, right? Like it's impossible to deliver 70, 80 ETH worth of value, right? Like and people who buy in, they still expect it to go up, and it's just not sustainable. Now in my case, I wasn't expecting it to go up, I wasn't expecting it to go down so much, right? So so it's just, I think that's one of the issues. And the other one is the thing that me and Zanika talked about, which was basically is that you're essentially profiting from people leaving your community, and that's another issue, 100%. Right? So
that's actually a big ideology behind the reason we designed House the way it is we're building out different monetization vessels, because I mean, in theory, with royalties, you only make money when people leave your community. If you're doing well, if you curate a community well, if you build a place that people want to be, people won't sell your NFT. And it's a huge conflict of interest, because the most successful businesses now become the least profitable. I look at one example. I'm not going to give a specific project, but there's a lot of projects that have Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4. When they become more and more successful, they just have to keep dropping new collections, because their top collections don't get volume. You go look at Godjira, they have a 13 ETH floor on their Genesis with 3 listed, and the last sale was like 4 months ago. It's a very common story where you have, incredibly successful projects not making money, and these successful projects have large teams to upkeep. And so I would say, from that sense, I think it is somewhat positive for sure, because I think it also kind of changes the narrative and the expectation of projects, because now I think as a creator coming into the space, a lot of people think they can just be sustained off of royalties, when I don't think that can realistically be done with the size of the market right now. I don't think royalties, especially if you want to have a large team, like if it's an individual creative, that's different. But if you have a project that's like big with a team, you need sustainable revenue. And I don't think royalties are something you should be relying on. And I think with them going away, that's no longer part of the equation for a lot of people looking to launch projects. So I think it kind of shifts that expectation. Like you look at a lot of the bull run projects, like so few of them are here. A lot of them I think were just rug pulls, but I think a lot of them too probably just ran out of money, because they're like, oh, I got $1 million. I'm making, first month royalties, maybe 10 grand, like this is good. This is great. Where this is sustainable when it's not, you look now, a lot of those projects are getting like 1 sale a month or even less. They're making $10 a month, which just, it's not sustainable at all.
So you mentioned that you're building other business models for House, but also you said that you're consulting and advising other projects. So what do you say to them? Like say new projects wanting to come into the space, knowing what we know now, that royalties are not sustainable and that they have to potentially do this thing of blocking this marketplace and that marketplace. And then there are many people who don't like that. I know a lot of people were like, if your project is, let's say, for example, if your project is blocking Blur, then I'm not going to buy in. And, people have said that to me. Not that we have done that, but, people have said that to me. And it just makes me think. So one of the things that we are actually doing with InPeak Genesis passes is that we are going to, over time, we are going to buy and burn them and reduce the size and actually switch to a different business model. So there will be only a small number of people who are, early adopters that will be able to have that. And that will be my small kind of inner circle. Other than that, I'm just going to, over time, as we gain more success, I'm going to, buy the floor, burn them and get rid of them, because it's just like not sustainable, like it's, I'm not going to go down that route. And we also released the Gen 2, which we are then now burning. So we are actually, we incentivize people to switch to a Soul token. And we are going to have this PFP, which is going to be free, royalty free, all that stuff. But it's not really to make money at all with that. It's more about building a community and kind of like bringing awareness to what we are doing. But building other kind of business models around it. So just don't want to get trapped into that Gen 1, Gen 2, Gen 3, Gen 4
Oh
thing,
yeah,
right? Like,
you
yeah,
don't
it's
want
just
that.
not impossible, right? It's just not sustainable. So but what do you say to people coming in and starting now? How do you advise them? Most of these PFP projects, especially, they don't really have a product or service. It's not
Mhm.
quite clear what they have. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. I think one of the cool things as well, working with larger IP, is there is funding. There is a brand behind it. It's not necessarily about the money for the vast majority of these people. Most of it's like consumer acquisition, building a community. There's an incredible amount of power in like cumulative action and having a community behind you. And that's something that I think really entices a lot of these big brands. It's like actually having a community. You look at like the way like apes are promoted, like they have so many people using their branding as a profile picture. Like that's such a cool thing for them. And that's a really interesting thing to a lot of brands. So I would say for the vast majority, if not really all of them, like that's kind of the mindset is it's not really about the money. It's more so about building a community, getting people engaging with your product, because most of these projects have quite a bit of funding or a large backer to the point where mint or royalties don't matter. It might not be sustainable, but the business behind it is sustainable. And if they can leverage the community to make that business more successful, then that's the model they're going for.
How do you see brands, or how do you explain the concept of community to them? Because, you know, when I go back to early days of me explaining social media to brands, in 2017, I made a documentary called The Millennial Disruption, came out 2018. Gary Vee was on it, people from The Economist, Marie Claire magazine, Bentley, Jaguar Land Rover, and we were, at the time, we were talking about explaining to brands, about social media, and that was difficult. Like, trying to explain to them that you need to that marketing is now a dialogue, is not just a monologue, it's not just a broadcast. But community is another level of engagement. And actually, I did an interview with the team behind Game of Thrones NFTs, and they also did it for, I think it was Matrix or something like that. And they, and I mentioned, how do you manage the community side of things? And they actually found it. They mentioned that it's on the podcast that they found it quite difficult because it's a lot of engagement. And then of course, then I look at brands like Moonbirds, where I've been really deep into that community, and I've been I find that it actually gets very hard because because you build a community, and because of the sort of monetized nature of Web3, it becomes quite hard for for brands to maintain that kind of excitement and relationship when people buy at different prices, and then there's like ups and downs. So it's all good and well until the price is going up, but which is one of my problems with tradable NFTs. I'm like, okay, if it's or tradable tokens, because it's really hard to build a community when people are losing money.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, so how do you there are two questions here. Let's first uh, work on the first question, which is, how do you explain the concept of community to bigger brands? Then that we can get to the next question, is that now let's say it's not a big brand to start with, although for example Moonbirds is a big brand, right? But still it's very difficult because there are different market conditions, and people have got different expectations, and it's not always easy. So how do you explain these nuances to people, to brands?
I mean, it's honestly hard. I would say the tricky thing about community is I think it's at the end of the day what makes and breaks a project. You look at, I mean, everyone tries to figure out like, hey, what's the uniting factor between every blue chip? I think it's pretty obvious. It's community. Like they all have good communities. That's what there is at the end of the day. Beyond utility and all that, community is what's left. And I think the interesting thing about community is It's incredibly hard. I think the reason, not to go on a huge tangent, I think the reason we haven't seen, a real blue chip established in the bear market is because it all comes down to attention. We're in an attention economy. Attention's more valuable than money. That's why you have Diki Daigaku minting free. They could mint paid, but they get way more attention because they're free. That's why they got the hype. That's why they were such an interesting project, is because they were minting for free. And so the interesting conversation I have to have with every brand, and the nice thing about working with this IP, is to build a successful community, it really has to be new attention. And it is so hard to compete in that attention game. It's so hard to build an active Discord because everyone's in 100 Discords. I'm in hundreds of Discords that I don't check, and that's where most people are. Most people have their home community. I'm a Moonbird holder. I think that's the thing. That's the reason I bought a Moonbird, is because I think they've done a better job than anyone of engaging the community. Go in the general chat. I guarantee you one of the last 10 messages will be a team member. And that's a crazy thing that you don't see in any other community. And so I think that's such an interesting thing, and such a good thing about working with these brands is you have an opportunity to onboard new attention, get new people engaged. And so that's a big thing I focus on with these brands, is how can we use your brand to bring new attention into the space, because you do not want to get in the ring of trying to compete for that same attention, because it's so hard to get. And yeah, I mean, that's really it. It's so hard to get attention if you don't, if you're not getting new users.
The truth is, though, that the attention in most cases has come from price action. That's the truth. And I think that even in Moonbirds, that's a struggle now, because the market conditions and not new entrants are, which is another thing that's like really, really weird, is like when the price goes down, all of a sudden people don't want to buy it. Like, it's like, I remember when Moonbears were in the 30 ETH, everybody wanted it. And people are like, if it ever goes below, 10 ETH again, if it ever becomes, a one digit again, I'm gonna buy 10 of them. And now that it is one digit, people don't want to buy it as much, because it's like, they're it's just a human psychology. So one of the biggest problems, I think, in this space, which I think is going to hold us back if we don't solve it, is the extreme monetization aspect of it, and or financialization aspect of it, which brings the game theory, like the game theory of creating these psychological, barriers for people to show interest in projects for a genuine reason, right? Like, most people are buying into them because of various kinds of hopes for gains and things like that. So when you look at the next generation of communities being built over the coming months, I understand that you mentioned that the attention, considering these new challenges being brought up by the royalty situation, by general market conditions, how do you see brands entering into this space being able to compete and actually being able to because, like, do people really want to go into yet another Discord? Let's say, for example, if you're talking about Disney, right? Like, do I really want to be in the Discord, Disney Discord? Like, do I really want to be in? So I think the whole concept of community building, we are also starting to question a little bit. It's not exactly what in the beginning it was fun because there were not that many. Now there are so many. So how do you tackle that?
I mean, I think it's kind of a similar answer to my last one, onboarding, finding a new segment and bringing them in. One example I'll give that was actually super successful with the Smurf Society, which is a project I'm working with right now. One of our partnerships was with Lens Protocol. Do you know Lens by chance?
Yeah, we are actually going to be incorporating Lens Protocol into our platform.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love Lens. They
Yeah,
they did a great job for
they're also
Smerfs.
going to have a channel on the platform.
That's really exciting. Yeah, really, really awesome protocol. But they're we had a partnership with them, and they have a huge DeFi crew. A lot of people probably haven't touched NFTs. We did one post on their platform, and I think it was like the fifth most liked post. People loved it. People wanted to engage, and we were actually able to bring a new segment into Web3 through that. And it was such a cool thing because you go look at the Smurfs Discord, and there's like non-NFT people in there. It's such a weird thing, but it's so successful because you go look and you go talk to a lot of Web3 people. A lot of Web3 people probably don't really know the Smurfs are here, but I mean, you go look at our Discord and it's a different story because we managed to capture that new segment through the DeFi platform. And that's one of the really interesting things after kind of seeing that play out that I'm trying to do with my consultancy is really network with these different platforms where I can work to onboard people. Because I mean, onboarding people who haven't touched crypto or NFTs is incredibly hard, but DeFi people, it's not that hard. They probably know what MetaMask is. They know what these exchanges are. Like it's such an easier thing. And so I think that's such a powerful thing that I'm really trying to capitalize on. And that's like one of my big goals this year. And one of the things I try to do with networking is network like beyond just NFT people, because there's so much value that really anyone can bring. And I think these DeFi platforms, especially, like I think there's so much mutual benefit.
I agree. We are also doing something similar with, so with the platform being rebranded soon, we are going to enable people being able to have their own channels. And then within the channels, they'll be able to monetize it through normal subscription or, tokenized, right? And by doing that, we are going to enable a lot of new people coming into the space, into the platform. And then they will see the option of, oh, I can monetize through tokens or I can monetize with normal subscription. And then hopefully they will be thinking about what is a token, or maybe if they are already familiar with, maybe they already have, because there are 350 million people who have crypto wallets, whereas there are like 40,000 NFT community right now. So, so it's a much bigger world out there. So one of the things that we are focusing on, and tomorrow I actually have another meeting again with the team from Coin Bureau, like also talking to YouTubers who are doing content around finance and crypto and tokens in general, but not, maybe they're not necessarily into the NFTs that much, and kind of like enabling them to use the ERC 721 business model, or smart contracts to create businesses around it. So I agree, that's definitely like the next sweet spot, is people who at least have a wallet, who have ever bought a crypto, and then showing them that, hey, actually this goes beyond just buying some crypto and saving it. You can actually build a business around it, that you can have a business model around it. So that's definitely the next sweet spot. Tell me more about Smurfs. So how did that come about? Did you help them out from the beginning? Yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much. Yeah, I've been there pretty much from the beginning. I wouldn't say from like the beginning of when they started building, because they've been building for quite a while. Just for context, it's it's a brand called Blue Planet licensing the Smurfs IP. And kind of their mission is they want to build a sustainability brand, because one of the powerful things that I mentioned earlier about NFTs is the idea of cumulative action, and I mean, obviously the need for sustainability is greater than it's ever been, and so a lot of what they're trying to do and a lot of like the core vision behind it is to leverage this really well-known IP that everyone knows and loves and use it to kind of unite people behind a common vision and execute that vision together. So they're actually building out what they call a community for good, which is this cumulative action community that kind of works together to make the world a better and more sustainable place, which I think is a really cool thing. And they have a few different pillars. I would say that's like the main pillar. And then they have another one that's actually gaming, which kind of doesn't seem like it goes together, but that was the way they actually built their community and their allocation method to actually like bring people into the community and allocate their allow list was through this game that they built on chain. And that's actually what our initial partnership with Lens consisted of, is we had an on-chain game where people could trade assets and actually combine these assets to like make potions and engage in the ecosystem. And it was a really cool thing. And it actually worked incredibly well. Our first day with Lens, we launched it with Lens. Our first day, I think we had 25,000 users, which was insane. You know, it really goes to show how early we are when one DeFi platform can bring that many people. So it was a really crazy thing. But that's a little context on Smurfs.
Okay, cool. Very cool. So what's next for you? Talk a little bit about what you're doing as a with collabs. So you've built a team, and you go out there, and we are going to do a session separately on the platform specifically focused on becoming a collab manager. Can you explain to maybe people who are listening from outside Web3, but even people who are here, what is a collab manager exactly, and what's the scope of the role?
Yeah. So I think a better place to start, just to back up a little bit more, would be to first define what is a collab. So a collab at its core, I would call it highly targeted advertising. This is kind of the way I preach it to brands, because it's a kind of a very, I don't know, it seems like a weird thing, but the market's so small, it's incredibly hard to actually reach consumers. The nice thing and the way collabs work is it's essentially exchanging the value you can offer as a brand. So your allow list, assuming there's some sort of value to it for exposure within their server. So generally the way that works is you have a number of allow list spots. Let's say I go approach Doodles with allow list spots from the Smerfs. I offer them, let's say, 100 Smerfs for essentially a little advertisement in their server through a raffle. So you have raffling software like Premint or AlphaBot, where you have these little segments that people can read about the project with spots attached where you can enter a raffle for following, joining the Discord, maybe doing something else. And so that's, I would say, at a very basic level, that's kind of what a collab is. It's the primary vessel through which the majority of projects market, to actually reach those consumers, because it does do a great job. You can get a lot of exposure through doing collabs. I would say the problem with collabs, and where the sustainability problem long-term for collabs comes in, is you're reaching all of the same people every time. Anytime any brand does collabs, you're reaching the same audience that every other project that does collabs do. You go look at, I think I was reading this earlier, there's a project called Funkari. They're an alpha server. They did three collabs a day since launch. I mean, you think about how much noise goes through that channel. The problem with collabs, and kind of where a lot of my business model is actually built, is building these catered marketing plans, because so many people who run agencies or different marketing vessels for projects just do collabs. Like, that's all they do. They just do collab rounds, and collab rounds don't work. There's too much noise. And so you kind of have to find a nice sweet spot.
So tell me, what is that sweet spot? Like, how do you differentiate? Because I agree with you. And I think that this collab idea or collab management, I don't think it will be the same by the end of this year. I think it's going to really change. So tell me what you're doing. How are you differentiating?
Yeah. So the big thing, the big thing is catering to the brand. As I kind of said at the beginning, IP needs to be handled with like a different level of intentionality, and there's so much more you can do with it, whenever you have a brand that has that established IP. And so I would say the big thing is creating funnels. I use collabs as, I wouldn't say the top of the funnel, but the top of a funnel. I use collabs as a funnel. If you win a collab, you get something, but you don't get the most valuable thing. I use the collabs as a way to bring people into the community and actually bring them into these different engagement vessels where they can engage and get to know the community and engage in software. So like one example, a project I'm working with right now called 3-Year Bunny, we went and did collab rounds, and we gave out 3-Year Bunny crates, which are essentially a mystery box that holds an amount of our in Discord currency, which you can use to go play the different games we've built. And so, yes, we are giving them something. It doesn't have monetary value, but it's essentially a way to get them kickstarted into the game so we can still get the exposure without sacrificing the quality of holders. Because the other side of collabs that a lot of people miss is it's user acquisition. The people you give spots to are the people in your community. If you go give spots to a bunch of people who don't care about your community, you're not going to have a community. You know, you have to be incredibly intentional with who you give spots to and how you give spots out to actually build a community. And that's something a ton of people miss is community management is equally reliant on collab management, because you have to not only get the right users, but you have to engage them well. And those are kind of the two sides of the coin that make a good community, and that, I mean, allow you to actually, build a successful community.
Yeah, and that's why, for example, with our free PFP drop, basically we are asking people to log into the platform, to get allow list, right, and to be able to kind of enter the raffle. And some people have been saying, it seems like quite a long procedure to do that. And I'm like, if you can't be bothered logging into the platform and like joining a session to get a feel for what we're doing, so then this is not the right community for you, because otherwise basically all you're saying is just give me a free spot so that I can sell it and make some money, right? Like, and and that's why when the team said, can we, or so-and-so community is saying, can we do it without, I was like, no, because that's the purpose, right?
I completely get that. I mean, I think you have a great mindset there. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly why I allocate spots the way I do. I think a lot of collab managers actually don't like working with me because I always have these complex systems. It's never you get a spot direct to contract. No one gets direct to contract spots. At the very least, you have to join the Discord and get a role. For some of them, it's go and play our game. For some of them, it's, for you, it's go join our platform. You need to have these deeper levels of engagement because they allow you to better curate. Because I mean, that's what you need to do if you want to be successful. You have to find the attention that's willing to pay attention to you and acquire that.
Yeah, and also even people who say, "Oh, I'm not interested in education," actually, when they get engaged, they are interested. Like, for example, last week we had an amazing session about Bitcoin ordinals, and we had in depth, like 75 minutes. We were all really glued to it. And then like on Friday, we had a session about how to use Chat GPT, and it's like, on a Friday afternoon, people are sitting there watching, learning about that and asking questions. And that session went on for nearly 90 minutes, so I think the level of the kind of things that we are teaching are really, really useful things for this space. And then we are also going to be creating other brands within it. Like, for example, we are going to have FemPeak, which is focused on women empowerment. Then we are going to have another brand that is focused more on peak form, which is going to be focused on wellness and being on your peak form. So we are going to have that, and then there will be other communities that are going to have their own brands on the platform. So I think there's always interest in these things, but people have gotten in this space, have gotten used to the idea of getting something for free and selling it and making some quick buck. Even if it's like, even if it's just like 50 quid, they will sell their soul for it, right? So we need to change that mindset, and it's just about slowing people down a little bit to get them to show interest in something a little bit deeper, and then they realize that actually, it's kind of like once you eat your vegetables, it's not that bad. It's like that. Well, Carson, this has been very interesting. Do you want to leave us with some last words about House, where you're going with that, and or anything else where people can find you? What do you want them what kind of action do you want them to take? How can they follow your progress?
Very interesting. I'll leave you with my Twitter handle. People can check me out there. I got some pretty amazing things coming. I am working on a media brand called The Builder's Block, which is rolling out very soon. Actually, we've been doing proof of concept for pretty much all the media we're going to be distributing, and it's all gone better than I could have expected. So lots of really exciting things coming. You can check out my Twitter. My Twitter handle is Captain CK ETH. Look it up on Twitter. Check me out. But good things coming. I encourage everyone to stay tuned. I'm sure if you haven't heard of The Builder's Block, you're going to hear of the Builder's Block. I know it.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. And I look forward also to having you on the platform with a live audience, maybe with Ghali, to do a more in-depth session on all things collab management as well.
Yeah, I'd love it.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Carson, also known as Captain CK. Be sure to give him a follow on Twitter at BuildersBlock. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe to it on Apple, Spotify, or any other one of your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to give it a 5-star rating and write a review. The full interviews are also available on my YouTube channel, The Somi Arian Show.